Welcome back to another episode on the Everyday Alchemist podcast, a podcast where we remind you to tap into the alchemist inside of you because we all are powerful beings and we have the power to transmute our pain into purpose. And today's episode is a testimony of this. Before we jump into this podcast conversation, I'd like to welcome our co-host Nick Sharma joining us today.
Hi, everyone.
So before we actually start this episode, I do have to give a bit of a disclaimer. We are talking about a sensitive topic today, which is sexual trauma. So if you are not comfortable with this topic, I would suggest if you could please move away and jump into another episode. Okay, so I will now welcome our guest, Niamh, who is joining us from Ireland. So Niamh is a mind-body mentor, a somatic and energy practitioner based in Ireland. She healed her paralysis by having a direct conversation with her brain, an experience that radically reshaped her understanding of the human somatic approaches. Her work now focuses on helping people understand the language of body and shift long-held patterns through our awareness, presence, and conscious engagement. Her story has even reached the global stage through her TED Talk. Welcome, Niamh.
Thanks, Million. It's great to be here with you.
We look forward to having this conversation with you.
Likewise.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Niamh, for joining the conversation today. I actually wanted to sort of jump in and really start this whole podcast and invite you to sort of share your story. So, in whichever way you feel is safe and aligned with the way you'd like to share. But I'd love for the audience to understand a little bit about your story and also, what happened on a travel that you endured, some event through that process. So over to you to sort of give us a bit of a background on that.
Yeah, great. And I think I want to even rewind a little bit more to give this a bit more context. So I was a television presenter in Ireland, and it was something that I worked very hard to get, being from a very small town. You could say the odds were stacked against me in terms of the career that I dreamed of. And once I secured that career and that role that I sought out, it didn't feel like how I thought it would feel. And I remember being in a hotel room revising my script for the morning after, and I felt lost, and I felt I had I had dedicated, almost a decade to the pursuing of this. I had attained it, but I felt lost and empty. And I thought I would be happy, right? And I thought all of the feelings that I had within would dissipate once I had achieved a goal. And I say this because it's a familiar story. You can insert whatever your own goal was. And so I didn't really know what to do. And I thought I would take a break. And I knew I always wanted to travel around the world. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. Now is the time. And, I can hop back on this horse when I'm back, but I'll just give myself room to breathe, room to think. And so I backpacked around the world alone. And after about 2.5 years, so it extended. After about 2.5 years, I find myself in Southeast Asia. And I'm having a really good time. I still don't know what I want to do. But on my adventures, I ran into some troubles, which is what you were pointing to in the beginning. And I want to say to people, my story isn't that. That is one incident that has happened, but that's not my story. And so I was sexually assaulted raped, or I think they say graped now, by two men who had befriended me over a number of days. And the incident was over a number of hours, and I got free. And I didn't know what to do, whether to go home or to continue on with my travels. And I decided that I wouldn't let these people stop me, and I continued on. I was clearly traumatized and not thinking straight, and I continued on. I had a visa for Australia. And as some of you might know, part of the working visa for Irish people anyway, coming to Australia is you have to do a certain number of farm days in order to get a second visa for the next year. I think it's something like 90 days of farm work,
Mm.
right? Which is a lot. And so I started doing the farm work. And after after some time I find myself picking strawberries on a strawberry farm, and I'm in squat position for a number of hours, and I stand up and my foot is dead. And now, naturally, because I'm in squat position for a number of hours, I think, okay, I've cut off the blood to that area. I'll just have to wait a couple of minutes for it to come back. And I'm waiting and I'm waiting, and it doesn't come back. And so I give it an hour, I give it a couple of hours, I give it overnight, I give it a couple of days, I give it a couple of weeks. My foot never comes back. So I lost complete function of my left foot, and I was also numb from the knee down. So no feeling, no movement. It's like a dead part of my body. So I have to lift that leg from the hip so my foot can clear the ground. And I have very big feet, size 8, size maybe 42, depend like I'm a tall woman, right? So I'm really lifting my hip high so my foot clears the ground. But I decide to travel back to Ireland then to see medical professionals because it was clear that this wasn't going to go away on its own. And so I saw all the medical professionals, and the best guess I got was that it was probably nerve damage and it would probably come back in a year or two. Now, for me, there was a lot of anger and frustration here because I don't like probablys.
Mm.
And so for me, probably is not definite. How can you tell me that it's probably going to be a year or two if you can't tell me definitely the cause? There's no common sense there. I'm a big woman for common sense, okay? There's no common sense there. And so I continued on trying many different methods, and it was only when I was seeing a therapist, and I had told her my 30th birthday was coming up and I wanted to be alone. I didn't want to pretend I was okay or pretend I was happy around people. I just wanted to go away.
Mhm.
And so my therapist recommended this Buddhist meditation center in the it's called West Cork. It's a part in the south of Ireland. And I had never meditated before in my life. I had never stepped into spirituality at all. And here they were teaching loving kindness. So they had loving kindness every day at 3 p.m.
Right.
And that was really my only activity there during the day. So I went. I went to this loving kindness meditation.
Is it like
And
a
then
monastery that you were going to?
so the it's not a monastery. It's a Buddhist meditation center that
Okay.
also does have a place where practitioners can stay long term for, I
Right.
think some of them have even been there for a decade, but I wouldn't say monk like they're long-term practitioners. But in saying that, the lineage of the Buddhist monks have come over, have blessed the place, do visit it. They've just built an amazing temple there, like a proper temple. Um,
Mm.
and it was actually built. first and foremost to be a hospice center where people would go to spend their last days
Right.
in a Buddhist environment where they really respect death. And so it's interesting that I'm going to a place of, let's say, death and rebirth in the period of life that I was in because I was really hanging on. I was really hanging on. And so here in this loving kindness meditation, you are sending love to yourself, and then eventually you send love to people you don't like. So you can see where this is going.
Mm-hmm.
And so because I had, let's say, nothing left to lose, I sent love to these people. But I was beginning to understand through exploring other methods and other kind of philosophies at that time. And I was beginning to understand, let's say, energetics, that if I have a thought about somebody, right, and if it's a thought of hate or if it's a thought of anger, it's creating a physiological charge in my body. So I am suffering, right? I am feeling the charge of that thought towards a person. And so a way to neutralize that would be then to hold, let's say, the opposite thought. So I'm offering these two men love, or I'm offering these two men forgiveness on the basis of I'm neutralizing that charge, right? If I neutralize that charge, they're no longer in my thought field, they're no longer in my field. The thoughts are no longer affecting me. And I can also come to that place with the understanding of that higher perspective that for them to perpetuate that kind of evil is
Mm.
because they must have suffered themselves. Or, they could not have had the perfect life to be able to do that kind of behavior or act. So from that higher perspective, I can come in and go, listen, your life must have been pretty shitty to
Mm.
lead you down that path to do those kinds of acts. So from that place also I can offer forgiveness. So on the fourth day there, I'm offering them the love and forgiveness. My upper left leg twitches. Now that's the only part of my left leg I can feel. And on the fifth day, at the same point of the meditation, as I'm sending them love, my upper left leg twitches again. I notice it again. And a word, psychosomatic, drops into my head. Now, I had never heard of that word before that point. I didn't know what it meant, but it came in so clear. So next thing I'm jumping on, the internet. Well, they had no internet here. So as soon as I get home, I'm searching on the internet, psychosomatic illnesses. And I find a whole host of people who healed what was the seemingly impossible through understanding. So psycho is mind, somatic is body, through
Mm.
understanding that there is a mind-body connection and the body is expressing, let's say, what the mind cannot.
Hmm.
Mm.
So can I just jump in? Because I'm very spiritual, and you said you're not spiritual. You were not spiritual before this event. I meditate as well. So I'm just quite interested to know at what point in that meditation did you feel like forgiving these people? Because I know you said you were into this meditation. Do you think it was a higher soul, a higher guidance that came through? What made you forgive these guys? Because it is quite a big deal to forgive someone in some, for something as big as that.
Yes, well, I think as I explained to you there, logic in terms of energetic. So, right, I want to start there because you don't need to have any kind of spirituality to heal. You don't need to have any kind of religious basis to heal. However, it does absolutely help. Like if you can trust in something that's looking after you and supporting you, it absolutely facilitates this process, but it doesn't need to be there. So, the examples I gave are with the logic and reason. However, one thing I didn't share in my story is when I was in that traumatic incident and let's say immobilized, it
Mm.
was two angels that came to me that gave me the energy to get up and go.
What
And so,
at that moment in time, like you physically saw something, or how did that sort of manifest?
I was incapacitated and you could say in another world because there was
Mm.
a lot of, I had been fed a lot of drugs.
Mm,
Like it was a page this long of drugs I could write out. And so I saw them in my mind's eye. And
Yeah.
not just once, they were there persistent, I would say, for hours, telling me to get up, get up, get up, get up, but I couldn't. I was physically incapacitated. And they gave me the strength to get up.
sure.
And so I never had an experience like that before. I was raised a Catholic. A lot of people in Ireland are raised a Catholic because it's just part of the culture. But
Mm,
I used to, like many teenagers, skip church, tell my parents that I was going, but actually spend the time down at the river. And as an adult, I would have said that I was agnostic, right? So and this was really what I would have said kind of with humor is more like an agnostic, or sorry, an insurance policy, because just in case at the very end there was something, I'm not totally writing it off. But
yeah.
yes, so that experience, it gave me faith
Yeah.
because if something was to have happened to me then, let's say if my life was to have ended there and then, it would have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
And they were very persistent about me carrying on, about
sure.
me getting me up and getting me out of there. And so in my journey moving forward, I felt them with me all of the time. And
Right.
I surrendered into their embrace, let's say. I surrendered into their energy, gave me strength. However, that is like if you could call it like a hammock, right? So you can nestle
Mm,
into that. However, in order to like move you forward, it's you that has to do it. They can support you, but it's
mhm.
you that has to do it.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
think that's where I was getting at because I work with angels and I felt prompted to push and ask for this because I think there's people out there that probably need to hear it because forgiveness is such a big part of healing. So I think that's why we had to backtrack a little bit and dig in there. So thank you for sharing
Mhm.
that. That's actually amazing.
Actually, based on, I guess what you've, and firstly, thank you for sharing what you did. I think, it obviously takes courage to talk about these experiences and then, obviously to share it publicly and on your TED talk as well. So I want to commend you on that firstly. But I guess, it also touches on a topic, that often, like, we live in a social media world where, everyone's got an opinion about everything these days, and they're online and, they're sharing everything. But what you do often find is things that go into the hard basket often aren't things that people materialize and talk about too often. And, I guess sexual assault in particular is massive. Like in New Zealand, for example, we've only got like 5 million people. But I was just looking at the stats earlier, and 1 in 3 women, they basically have some kind of a sexual assault sort of event in their lifetime. 1 in 8 men go through the same ordeal in their lifetime, and the staggering sort of stat that I saw is that 92% of sexual abuse cases in New Zealand don't even get reported, and I'm sure that's probably the same, right across the world. So definitely is something that is in our society, and whether it be cultural or just because the way we are, it's not something we talk about too much. So it's great to have advocates and tools. I think that's probably the more important thing that people can sort of adapt and take on board to help them.
Just to take you back to psychosomatic, because I know it is such a big topic where, there are emotions trapped and doctors are just telling, they can't even diagnose it, right? So could you just go back to psychosomatic and just continue on with what you were saying? Because it's so interesting that people just keep pushing their emotions down and they never diagnosed correctly.
So really the back arse of the internet was my best friend at that time because the Western medical system, like you say, had no knowledge of this, or at least it wasn't on the forefront of any of the practitioners' minds that I had seen. And so when I say the back arse of the internet, I mean internet forums, because right now, mind body connection, maybe it's because the world I'm in, is getting a little bit more traction. But
Mhm.
when I was looking at it, it was even less than that. So, I'm on forums, right, reading people's experiences. And this doctor's name kept coming up, Dr. John E. Sarno. And he actually coined the term the mind body syndrome, which came from tension myoneural syndrome. And it was his work that I was initially introduced to, that I had initially found. And he was speaking to you can lose function in a particular area, or a particular area can be inflamed because of what he called an oxygen switch, right? There's like an oxygen switch in the brain. Now, I'm going to have to say this has never been proven. Okay.
Mhm.
This is his theory. He was not interested in clinical trials, although the study that I reference in my TEDx talk, Listen to Your Body, actually is influenced and inspired by this doctor, Dr. Johnny Sarno. Um, but he talks about, so first of all, Dr. Johnny Sarno was a physician in a New York hospital, and he used to treat people with back pain. And so they would come to him and they would complain of back pain, and he would do surgery. And about it was something like 95% of them, the vast majority of them would come back in 6 months' time, a year's time, and complain of the same pain, even though they had had surgery. And after a couple of years of this, he said, something's up. And so he actually started talking to them. What's going on in your life? And then he realized a lot of them actually had some kind of emotional strain, emotional pressure. So then he split the groups, right? So he did surgery on 50% of them, and he talked to the other 50%. And he found that the people that he talked to 6 months, a year later, were always doing far better than the people that he performed surgery on. So then he moved into 95%. He educated them on mind body education. What does that mean? How the how the body and mind hide emotions within the body to allow you to continue on with what you're doing, with the way you
Mhm.
are. You don't have to change anything about your life, and all of your attention is focused on whatever ailment or symptom that has produced itself. You can continue living on as normally and managing the symptom rather than addressing your external or internal world. Now, there was one of the things in his book, Healing Back Pain, and he speaks to a lot more than back pain. He just uses that as a primary example because that is the world's number one leading cause of disability, back pain.
Mhm.
And so, this oxygen switch, when I was reading the material, I thought, well, if my brain switched oxygen off to that part of my body, well, then maybe I could get it to switch it back on. This is what I believed in, right? If my brain switched off, I can switch it back on. And I knew I had come to the place because I had ruled out every other possibility in terms of structural and nerve and whatnot, because everyone was giving me maybe and probably. Nobody was giving me definitely. So I went and I acknowledged that, okay, I do have a trauma, a few months back that I haven't emotionally processed. I had no
Mhm.
idea how to. I just kept going. And so, yes, my body literally stopped me from moving forward. So, if we look at the parts of the body where things are held, it can tell us about, let's say, maybe the message that the body is giving us. So, your feet carry you forward. I wasn't able to move forward anymore. And I literally, emotionally and mentally, wasn't able to move forward because I hadn't addressed what I had been through. And so I decided to lock myself into the dining room of my parents' room where I was staying after I got back. And this is it's the good room that barely gets used, it gets used for Christmas dinner, and that's about it. So I knew I wouldn't be disturbed by locking myself in there, and I spoke with my brain. And first, I got really angry. So I let out all of my emotions, and it was like, F you, you're after taking my foot, my leg. I used to be really physically fit. I used to do loads of yoga, climb mountains, could go here and go there. I'm not able to do any of that. So I just let out all of my frustration, my anger, and how unfair this was. And after I had gotten that all out of my system, directed towards my brain,
Mm-hmm.
I then thanked my brain. So I moved into thanking it.
Mm-hmm.
And the thanking it was understanding that it was actually giving me a distraction, right? So all of my mind was focused on how do I fix my foot? How do I
Mm-hmm.
fix it? And none of it was on, oh my God, I've just been traumatized, right? None of it was on the greater emotional pain that I feel inside. It didn't have to be because I was given something to fix, to solve that took up every waking minute of the day. So once I got that out and I thanked it because I understood it was protecting me from the greater emotional pain, I then asked it for my foot back. So I said, brain, I want my foot back.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go into, let's say, the exchange. So what am I going to do if my brain gives me my foot back?
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do in exchange?
Right.
Because the foot is there, right? The
Yeah.
dysfunction of the foot is there to distract me from the greater emotional pain. So if
Mm-hmm.
it gives me the foot back, then what's going to happen with that greater emotional pain?
Mm.
And so my promise then was, if you give me the use of my foot back, I promise I will deal with the greater emotional pain. I have no idea how to do that, but I promise I will try. Now, a couple of days, oh, sorry, I went to bed and I woke up and I had full use of my foot
Incredible.
just from a conversation.
Wow.
Now, I want to just add on to that. A couple of days later, because I thought, great, my foot's back. This is brilliant. I'm going to go for a walk like I used to, about 5 kilometers, which would have been nothing for me at the time. And I start going around this walk that I would have done around the countryside. And halfway around this walk, my sciatic nerve in my right leg this time, right through the kind of glute area, the pain was so sharp that it stopped me in my tracks and I couldn't take another step. And I had to ring my dad with a sense of defeat and ask him to collect me. And, my mind went into more like a place of depression in the beginning, kind of going, oh no, I'm back here again. I thought things had just turned around. And now I have another issue that stopped me from walking again.
And it's on
And
the
as
other
I was,
foot.
it was in
And
the
it's
other
on.
foot.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was in the right leg this time. And as I'm mulling over these thoughts, right? Because your mind is so great at producing all of these thoughts and these narratives for you and these worst case scenarios, some eureka moment came and was like, wait, what if my brain is checking in on me? Because I haven't actually addressed the greater emotional pain yet. I haven't actually followed through with my promise. And so I repeated the 4 steps that I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I told it how frustrated I was. I thanked it. I asked for the use of that leg back. And I promised I would deal with the emotional pain. That time I didn't have to wait overnight. It disappeared instantly.
Wow. That's
Amazing.
remarkable.
Now, a couple of days later, I'm writing, okay, with the right arm. And I get a shooting pain up my right arm. My first thought is, well, I don't normally write with a pen. I normally type. So of course there's going to be a pain in my arm. That's what my mind says.
Mm.
Mhm.
Then another thought comes in. Wait, no, my brain is checking in on me again. So I repeated those 4 steps and the pain went. And after that third time, I think the mind kind of realized I had it, that I was really solid on she's going to deal with this emotional pain. So it didn't check in on me after that. I was good.
So it's never come back, this pain.
So, caveat, I was very good for number of months, maybe 6 months. What I want to say to people, why did my body take away my foot in the first place? Because I wasn't aware of the greater emotional pain, I wasn't addressing it. So
Mhm.
anytime I now get a pain, I get a sty in my eye, I get a pain in my coccyx, I get maybe sores on my toes, I get shoulder pain, and I'm talking about a person might get, right?
Mm.
I know then that I am not consciously aware of what's upsetting me, and my
Yeah.
body is going, hey, Niamh, you need to look at something. So I
Yeah.
take it that my body is telling me to look within, and as soon
Mm.
as I address that, whatever it is, the
Yeah.
sty, the sores, the pain just goes, the symptom just goes.
Mm. It's so interesting, your story. And I'm nodding away here because about a year ago, so my grandmother died a year ago. And I remember, we were very close. She was very close with me since my grandfather died. So I grew up a lot in my younger days with my grandparents. And when she passed, I remember that moment. And so, almost instantly, I got this toothache. And I
Mm.
just kept bearing it. Just wanted to, get through the funeral proceedings. And then we also had a lot of family that came over. So, just with any funeral, there's lots of personalities and lots of formalities and lots of people, and everyone's got their own opinion about everything. So on one hand, you're trying to grieve and you're trying to make sense of what's going on, and at the same time, you want to do a really good job, for somebody that you are so dear and so so loved, that's no longer. And I just remember when we came out of the actual funeral on the day, the pain was just honestly like it was so unbearable. I was just beside myself, and I remember. Nilma actually reminded me we had to. So we finished the funeral, and then I literally had to get Nilma to book me a emergency dentist to do an extraction on the day because I just really couldn't handle anymore. So just speaking, I mean, listening to your story and a lot of some of the things that we spoke about was just the level of tension and just the level of
I think it was suppressed
loss,
emotions,
and yeah, that those emotions kind of all just triggered,
this
this
pain.
physical thing in my body. Um, but yeah, I'm sure there's some link there.
Often your teeth are connected ancestrally. So if something shows up in your teeth, it's to do
Right.
with something ancestral. Also, again, we think about what's the action of that body. Is there something you couldn't chew on? Right?
Yeah.
So maybe
Yes.
there's a part of you, right, that isn't fully accepting that your grandmother has passed, because obviously you want her to be there, she was a central figure in your life. And if you were working with me, when you came to me with that tooth pain, we would work with it in a particular way. So oftentimes when we experience pain, we want to do everything for it to stop, okay? Whether we go as far as to extract the tooth,
Yeah.
or we take pain medication, or we scroll in our phone, right, which produces all this dopamine. So we're just kind of numbing out. We're finding all of these ways to move away from the pain. What would happen if we are to actually sit with that pain? We're not actually taught how to do that. And I've provided a practice for your listeners, if it's okay if I share, on how
Yes,
to
sure.
do
Yes.
this,
Yes.
on how to
Absolutely.
do this, on how to sit with pain, which I call sensation. So we take every story away. The sensation, right? So the pain, the sensation is neither good nor bad. It just is. So if you're able to approach it as a sensation without the right, your understanding that it's something that you have to retract from, move away from. That's all the mind, the story, the narrative. If we were to approach it as sensation, and I know it's uncomfortable, but if you're able to approach it as sensation, what you will normally find is it begins to dissipate as you bring your presence there, or alleviate or disappear completely.
That's so interesting.
So you look at it as just a neutral thing.
Yes. So
Not
no
good.
matter how it's presenting itself,
Mm,
the it is just a sensation. It is neither good
right.
nor bad. Because let's say if you have a so as you mentioned, I am a TRE practitioner, right? Tension and trauma releasing practitioner. And if somebody is experiencing some kind of positive or not positive, kind of a blissful or euphoric emotion or something like this, or a floaty, dreamy state, this in terms of trauma release, right, is not good because the person is dissociating from their actual present moment experience. So when you're bringing up sensations in the body, we don't want to attach with them being good or bad. We want to be present. As soon as you go into labeling, oh, yeah, this is really nice, that's your mind having a thought about the actual experience. It's not you being present with the actual experience. And if you can bring your consciousness fully to the sensation,
Mm-hmm.
generally what happens is it quietens, it moves, it shifts in some way because this this pain, this true pain is asking you to sit with it, right? So you're busy, you're reaching out into the outside, you don't have time to sit with yourself. But there's a part of you that really wants you to acknowledge your emotional pain.
Gotcha. So interesting. So if I'm interpreting this correctly, so frustration was the first step, and then you need to,
Release of emotions.
yep. So release all your emotions, where you can have your screaming spell and say bad things, and then you thank your brain, um, and then the next part is to ask your brain, um, to give you back that part of the body that obviously was affected by
You're
the
asking for
emotion.
what you want.
Yep. And then the last step was, what is the exchange that you sort of pay back, for in order for your body, for your brain to release that part of the body back to you.
Hmm. So it's express, thank,
Mm-hmm.
request, exchange.
Fantastic.
That's amazing. So you do somatic healing as well. If someone is listening and they don't quite understand the concept of somatic healing and how it comes into trauma releasing, could you speak a little bit into that, please?
Yes. So somatic it just means body, right? Body. And so I found in my experience that I was going to a talk therapist and talking about what happened to me. And while I appreciated the feeling of support and someone, let's say, holding space for me, I could feel that it wasn't shifting something in my body. I could feel that there was something almost lodged in my body that just wasn't shifting through talk therapy. And she was actually the one who introduced me to TRE. And I went away and practiced it and was so convinced by it, I went away and trained in it. And so TRE, tension and trauma releasing exercises, it's activating, and I'm only speaking to the type I practice, okay? So TRE is activating the reptilian part of your brain, right? Your brain stem. And your brainstem is responsible for all of your autonomic functions like your blood pressure, your heart rate, your breathing. And it also has a release mechanism, right? So we have a built in kind of stress release mechanism or built up charge release mechanism. And we see this in the wild, right? You can find videos on YouTube of a gazelle being chased by a lion. And
Mhm.
once the chase is over, the gazelle gets free, it drops to the ground, it shakes, and then it gets back up like nothing has happened, right? It eats grass. So we actually have the same built-in mechanism, but what we also have is a more sophisticated brain that we are able to reason, right? So we can talk ourselves out and realize, I am actually safe, or the best way to manage this is to maybe contain myself, right? Rather than shake, right? And release that stress mechanism. We can see this mechanism in very young children, their bodies shaking. We can see this mechanism being
Mhm.
activated in people who are in shock, right? And maybe they start shaking. So they're releasing that charge. Now we can go in and activate that part of our brain, which will release from the body any pent up charge that has been suppressed, repressed, right? Created in your body, but not processed through from any moment from this point up to when you were in utero, right? So anything the physical body experienced. Because your physical body has lived through every experience. It's not just intellectually or
Mhm.
emotionally, it's also physically. So sometimes it's very hard to move forward when the trauma is held in the body. So an experience comes to share. In my maybe first year, 2 years after what happened to me, and I was on my healing journey, let's say, I joined this improv theater group. And it was wonderful for me to meet people and express. Now, we were away on a weekend together in this kind of cabin in nature. It's really beautiful. I had met these people a number of times before. I trusted them. A cat jumped onto a piano, onto a particular note, and my body took over, right? So it was ahead of my mind, and just there was fear written all over my face, and my whole body had tensed. So my body reacted to that sound before my mind could. And
Mhm.
everyone around noticed, right? They're like, "Are you okay?" Because I had literally just froze, gone into a kind of shock. So I had not at that time had so much release from my body, right? So when I made that promise to my brain, right, it gave me the use of my foot back, but I still had to release all the emotions. By the way, this speaks to the power of your mind. You'll notice I didn't actually have to do anything to heal
Mhm.
except ask for my foot back and
Mm.
tell it that I will deal with the greater emotional pain. I didn't have to deal with that first for it to release.
Mhm.
So healing can happen at many points of the journey, okay? For some people, it does have, you do have to release the emotions because remember, number one, your mind and body are trying to protect you. So if they know that you're not going to take it seriously, right, that you are going to kind of slack off, well, then it makes sense that they're going to keep that symptom in place so you really do show up for yourself. So it was through the TRE for me. So I would have had post-traumatic stress disorder, which is where my body is reacting to triggers in my environment that are outside of my conscious control. It was TRE that dissipated all of that from my body. Now, I will say that's not the only thing. So, the way I work is mind, body, energy. Releasing it from your body is like the foundation, okay? You need to kind of get that excavator in and get everything up and out so you have a solid foundation. But the next thing is your mind, right? Because as a, as I was speaking to the forgiveness, right? Any thought that you have creates a particular a physiological
Yeah.
state in the body. You're releasing particular hormones. You're releasing cortisol, adrenaline, dopamine,
Mhm.
oxytocin, whatever it is. So your thoughts are very, very powerful in influencing your state. So unless you address what you're thinking, which is
Mhm.
easier than what it sounds because you need to develop some kind of presence, right? To catch your mind and intercept it. If you don't do that, your mind will eventually create the same state for you. So it's not just releasing it from your body, it's also reframing what's in here. So you're moving down the track you want to be moving down.
Fantastic.
Where do you, sorry, in
Yeah.
your practice, where do you most commonly see trauma being held in in the client's body? Is there a particular place in the body where you feel the trauma goes and stores itself? Or is it always different depending on the situation?
So I'm going to say, because what I didn't bring in there was energy. Okay. So physically, you'll generally see trauma. So with theory, you have this muscle, the psoas muscle, right? That kind of mid abdomen comes down and wraps under your legs, right? And that curls
What's
your
it called?
body
Sorry,
in.
it's
So
SOAS.
psoas,
Okay.
Psoas, right? And that curls your body in, right? So if you're curling your body in, you're protecting all of these vital organs. So anytime, let's say you have a trauma response, fight, flight, freeze, this is activated, it curls you in. Okay. And so oftentimes in TRE, you're going to have a lot of movement here. So when I was talking about that release, it's coming through as movement and sensation. It's not through memories, right? So there's no re-traumatizing, there's no retelling your story. Your body is literally letting go of that charge. And so
Mm.
I'll often see movement in this area of the body because that's the area we curl in. Now, as it progresses, you're going to see movements in the chest, movements in the arms, movements in the head. You'll see it everywhere. But the most common in the beginning is that area because that is biologically where we curl in to protect ourselves. Now, energetically, right? Or for a symptom of a person. So I work with people with a whole wide range of symptoms, shoulder pain to kind of gastro problems to knee pain, whatever it is. That depends on the personality of the person. That depends on the life situation of the person. So let's say all of the kind of the gastro stuff is all what are you not able to digest in your life? What are you not able to assimilate? What are you not able to let go of, right? The knee problems are generally tied to your identity and you being very fixated on your identity and maybe you need to it could be on the person either bolster that, but mostly it's to soften it to kind of invite something new in. Shoulder pain is generally about holding burdens. So that's individual to the person. Then you have energetic, right? So energetic when we're talking about, let's say, the seven chakras, right? Each chakra governs over a particular area of life, a particular set of organs.
Mhm.
And so, depending on where the person might feel blocked, let's say vocally, it's going to be throat chakra. Let's say energetically is oftentimes the sacral chakra, the second chakra, because energetically that is where your life force is generated. So, it depends on what level you're talking. And when I work with people, we work on the three levels holistically together for true and complete healing, not just one area,
So it's not
because they
like
all
they
play.
So it's not like a client will come in and know exactly where the trauma happened and why they have this particular pain. It's through your questioning and identifying, maybe through the questioning, that they will know. Like in your case, you knew it was linked to the event that had happened. But if someone's had an issue for for the lifetime, for a very long time, they might not be able to identify where the trauma actually
Mm.
appeared in the first place.
Yes, great. So it doesn't actually matter, right?
Great.
Let's say with TRE, as I said, we're not working with the memories, we're not trying to retell the story, we're literally letting go of the charge that was held and created in the body. You don't have to have a memory of that. When I work with people, let's say in the language of the body, my course, when we work more on the plane of the body, right? As opposed to well, we work on the plane, the body and the mind, but as opposed to energy. So if we're working in that instance, and when I say it doesn't matter, what your body wants most is your presence, is your presence. Your presence is 99% of the time what dissolves the symptom, right? What dissolves the pain in an area is your presence. In terms of knowing what it is, like, right, if you want that info, one, you have to ask yourself, okay, so this is what I teach people who come to me. What's more important? Knowing why something is there or allowing it to leave the body? So let's say something is starting to present itself in the body. We're doing a practice and they're beginning to feel, for example, lots of chest pain, right?
Mm.
And again, I will, do this practice with them where it's right now it's not pain. We're going to look at it as sensation. It's neither good nor bad. Let's just place our attention there and observe it. And afterwards, let's say as we do that, it all dissolves and it's gone. And afterwards, that person will be, yeah, but why was that heart pain there? Is that from when my brother did that thing? Or is that from because of my mother? And I will say to the person, what's happening is something is trying to leave your body. Let's imagine, for the people who are listening, just an audio, right? Let's say in your chest, there's a balloon, okay? And you're feeling into the sensation. The sensation is like a balloon, and that balloon begins to leave your body, okay? It's beginning to float up and out. And you're
Mm.
so curious to know what it is that you will literally grab that string and pull along that
To
string
bring it
and
back.
pull it back down into your body just so you can pick it apart.
Yeah,
So you have to choose which is more important, today or your past.
so true.
It's like the healing or the story, right? You got to pick one.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's so true. I mean, I think there's a lot of people trapped, with that, where you can hear it in the way they talk a lot of the time. It's always repeating something that happened at some point in their life, and that just it's their thing, like, as much as it's the tag is, it's something that traumatic sort of happened in their life a lot of the time, but they just can't let go of that identity almost, so they sort of just keep repeating. It's like a broken record, and over and over.
So one, you have to want to, right? So I work with a lot of people that are in this place, but the number one is you have to want to, right? And if you want to, then we're in a good place. Two is it's understanding that that's all tied in with their identity,
Mm.
and identity is tied in with safety. Okay, so they're holding on to something. Uh, and safety is the number one priority of the mind and body. It wants to keep you safe. So
Sure.
moving into the unfamiliar for that person, right? Taking on a new story is unsafe. That
Mm.
story is very strong. Who would they be? Do they feel strong enough in themselves to be in a space of kind of like a no man's land? Because when you're moving from one strong story into the void to who you'll become, that place is very scary. That place is unsafe. You need to
Sure.
be able to hold yourself through this no man's land to make your way to the other side. And a lot of people, they don't know how to do that.
I can imagine. I was actually curious to just ask you a question. So, like, I've got an interest in business, career, money. That's kind of my thing, and I'm just curious to know, with a lot of this work that you do with specific, particular clients, when you lift this sort of trauma off their bodies, has it unlocked or unblocked, things that have probably stopped, abundance, or things like money and career advancements and stuff, where once it's sort of unblocked, it's given them a new lease or brought in more opportunities. Is that something that you've sort of seen, and is there some kind of patterns in terms of specific parts of the body that that was experiencing their pain?
So it's interesting the way you phrase the question, because for some people, who are very good at achieving things, they might not be connected with their bodies at all, right? And it's true, the achieving of said thing, which gives them a boost, which boosts their self-worth, but that's all kind of built on fallacy. Because if that person, and I've worked with people like this, if that person then falls ill and they can't get their boost, their hit of self-worth in the same way, they can spiral downwards easily and stay in this place. And they might try get themselves out by pushing themselves again. So I see this. They try get themselves out by doing the same thing they did before. They'll try push themselves and they'll go back again. And it's just this cycle. So what I want to say is doing this work builds awareness, okay? Which allows you to live in a more aligned way, because your body is going to tell you if you need to look at something, if you need to say no to something. Your body is going to tell you. Right now, your body might be saying no for you, right? So let's say you can't go out because you have a headache, right? You can't go out. So you'll just tell that person, I have a headache, so I can't meet you. Instead of you knowing that you didn't want to meet that person in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay. And so headaches, by the way, are generally self-critical thoughts, self-critical thinking. And so when you're living in this way, because it really is a way of living, like when you get into your body, that's it, you're in there, okay? And so your perception increases.
Yeah.
You're not only trying to intellectually figure something out, you have far more of that bodily intelligence available to you, and it will be practiced, right? Because you have to follow through in it, that trust is built. And so when you're moving out into the world, then, because you've done this process a number of times, because let's say the reason your body is having a symptom is because in one way or another, you're out of alignment, right? You're out of alignment. So let's say for me, I was just trying to carry on, railroading over the trauma I had been through, and not giving myself the grace or time that I needed. And so
Mm.
my body stops me. Now, when I am moving through life, if a symptom comes up, I am able to pause. I don't have to stop and take 2 years off or 4 months. I'm able to pause and go, wow, okay, there's
Mm.
something, because I am railroading ahead, right? There's something that is outside of my conscious awareness.
Mhm.
And I will correct that to get me back on path. But I want to speak to, because I know you had kind of success in there, and that's where I started. I went on a bit of a tangent. So just let me finish with the success bit. If you are moving yourself from the old self to the new self, which is what you need to do in this type of work, with the old self is the person you knew yourself to be, who you are in the familiar, to the new self, right? Who is still forming, who
Mhm.
wants to do these things, who feels the urges to do these things. And right in the middle here is fear, all the reasons you can't do these things. The more you do this, like cross over that boundary, which your body is going to ask of you, otherwise you're going to suffer the symptom,
Mhm.
you'll be pushed along more and more in alignment with what is actually for you, or you will suffer the symptom.
All right. So it's
And the
healthy to continue pushing.
So, what you mean by push, I'm going to interpret as your
A new
creative,
identity.
yeah, your creative energy, your creative force. Yes, this is healthy.
Mm. Gotcha.
It's your It's your creative force, your creative energy, which is your second chakra that wants to go somewhere. We are here to contribute to the world. We are here to be creative. We're creative creatures. Yeah. Now, pushing past your body's limitations, your body will tell you when you're doing that. So you
Sure.
might learn to do it in a way that respects your body and respects your creative force. Because if you don't act on that creative force, you will get blockages of, let's say, depression in the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah. Absolutely. Fascinating.
Yeah, speaking of chakras, you actually have been so kind to design a special offer for our audience, like you mentioned before. So I will put the link to that under the notes once we've published this. So thank you for this conversation. It's actually been really amazing. I've learned a lot. And
Yeah, Niamh, I sorry for all the questions that I had in my head. We could probably keep talking for hours, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your story. Firstly, your insights, your tools, your 4-step process as well, and just your wisdom, on the podcast. I think it's been a really enjoyable conversation, to say the least, and I've learned a lot. So that's firstly from myself, and
yeah, I just actually loved what you said at the beginning. You said this was part of my story, it's not my story. And I love it because I think we get initiated into these things because we are here for a greater cause. And I think you're doing it. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, but I think you are doing it because I watch your reels and I see the impact you're making on your clients, like the 70-year-old that was coming with the high blood pressure, at every check, but through your work she's now at a very normal rate. So it's incredible, even at that age, people are opting for this kind of healing. It's amazing. And I just want to honor you again for being here and sharing your story because it's so needed. And thank you for being here. It's been amazing talking to you. Is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up this conversation?
I'm very grateful. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation also.
Yeah,
And
and I
yeah,
will leave
thanks.
your links and everything because I think it's important people watch your Instagram because you have a lot of free information on there, and I'll put all your courses and everything underneath so people they know exactly where to find you. So I just want to say to everyone listening, just remember that your body is never working against you, it's always working for you, and we have such a divine mechanical intelligence inside of us. So yeah, if you're stuck, do definitely check out Niamh's work because she's incredible. And I think you're going to go places because it's so needed. So thank you everyone for listening, and we will catch you up in the next episode. Thank you.